Mr. Speaker, sir, I thank the Minister, SMS, MOS, and members for making so many contributions which have enabled us to have a lively debate on public housing. I've certainly learned a lot from this debate because the rebuttal points have been specific and substantial. While we may differ in our policy ideas and recommendations, all of us in this House share a common objective of keeping public housing affordable and accessible for Singaporeans. I also agree with Ms. Janet Ang that we are here to unite and not divide. But that is provided the government does not treat every alternative ideas as a source of division. I will now give specific responses to the questions and rebuttals. I will demonstrate to Mr. Murali Pillai and all of you that what PSP has proposed are feasible aspirations based on pain and choice. This is because our policies will benefit most Singaporeans, but there will be some slight negative effect on some as well, like those who have committed to high-priced resale flats in anticipation of future profits. This is no different from some of the other policy proposals made by PAP members. I thank Mr. Sito Yiping for pointing out the example of the Japanese property market, which indeed is one of the reasons why I have tabled this motion. I spent a total of 12 years, first studying and later working in Japan. So I have a fairly good understanding of what the overuse of property as an economic management tool had done to that country. However, the lesson I have learned was opposite to what Mr. Sito has tried to convey. The Japanese property market downfall was not due to just a change in policies. It was caused by property being used as a tool to prop up the economy for too long until it is no longer sustainable. The property market cannot rise forever at a fast pace. In the long term, any country's population will eventually peak and decline, and there will be fewer buyers than sellers. Continued economic growth will then depend on raising productivity and competitiveness. However, the more important property investment and speculation becomes in an economy, the more likely that economy will become less competitive, because property speculation and rent seeking are easier and better alternatives to innovation and entrepreneurship. In Japan, for example, I've seen how the average Japanese have been bought down by their mortgages, some of which straddle 2 generations. It is from that angle that I got worried when I look at the situation in Singapore today. High property prices, but the dearth of innovation and creativity. What we need is more innovation and entrepreneurial spirit to continue competing effectively with the rest of the world in the information age. A home is a place for a Singaporean to share comfort and love, not a chain that ties him down with a mortgage that needs to be serviced for the larger part of his life. He should spend his life innovating, creating, and fulfilling his potential. Singaporeans can become knowledge workers only if they are liberated from the bondage of mortgages and high property prices. The only saving grace is that our property market is still rising, partly because of population growth through immigration. If we do not want to be left with no choice, however, except accepting a continuous fast pace of immigration, we have to seriously consider a reset at this stage, when the foreigners, especially the Chinese, are still eager to put their money in our property market. So I think this is a brilliant opportunity, while our market is very bullish, for us to reset the policies. I think for years, policymakers and policy analysts have debated, yeah, maybe we should change our public housing policies, but we are at such a high price already. How do we do it? So I think that has been bothering a lot of people, but I think this is a brilliant opportunity. Fortunately, unlike Japan, we can use our public housing sector as a buffer. We can continue to allow foreigners and well-off Singaporeans to invest in our private property market at higher prices. But we must maintain an affordable and accessible public housing market so that our young Singaporeans can have the financial security to be enterprising risk-takers and build Singapore into a competitive information economy. While the government thinks it is doing its best, but I think there are substantial reasons to think that there needs to be a reset, because the current system is not delivering all the outcomes that we desire. For example, young couples are not forming families as fast as we want, CPF savings are being depleted, and there's no sign, going forward, there's no sign that this will slow down, because as the BTO prices escalate, the amount of CPF savings required to pay for the mortgage will be bigger and bigger. And our CPS contributions are capped, but housing prices are not capped. Also, the lease decay problem is worsening. And if we do not change the way we price the HDB flats, the lease decay problem will be a problem of every generation. So these are some of the problems that accompany the current housing policies. And I think we need to address them. And I don't think in the debate, and even what the minister said just now, have fully addressed that. The minister had concentrated on doing more of the same, sorting out the current tight demand-supply situation. But what is required is a fundamental change in the thinking of what should be the best public housing policies going forward. As a result, PSP has proposed the Affordable Home Scheme and the Millennia Apartment Scheme as key proposals for the policy reset. And I must say again, the Affordable Home Scheme and the Millennia Apartment Schemes, we have that in mind right from the beginning. I didn't shift my ideas from taking out of land cost and then now add back land cost as a deferred land cost. I must again repeat that point. So what are the advantages of the Affordable Home Scheme? Most important objective of this scheme is to stop the depletion of the CPF savings of Singaporeans from buying the HDB flat. What we are aiming for is to delink the CPF account from the HDB flat. Mr. Murali argued that only the ordinary account savings can be used for housing, and that is still the special account savings. But how many Singaporeans can meet even the basic retirement sum with just their special account savings and without having to sell their flats? Under the current system, retirement adequacy will only deteriorate further as CPF contributions are capped and have remained the same level for many years, while HDB prices continue to rise. SMSC man shared just now that, maybe the retirement situation in terms of the CPF savings balances are better than what we have gathered. But nevertheless, as BTO prices continue to go up, CPF contributions will continue to be depleted. And one thing I want to note, and I want to highlight, that SMSC man had defined the CPF account now as being one that would cater for both buying the HDB flat and for retirement. Is that something new to me? The CPF account is being pulled into financing the HDB flat from 1968. The original definition or original intention of the CPF account is for retirement. So I hope the government will clarify that later. So we want a situation whereby the members or the Singaporeans do not have to depend on resale prices for their retirement. Many members have pointed out that resale prices go up and down. This proves my point that retirement adequacy needs to be delinked from housing prices. Because resale prices go up and down, is our current system fair to the elderly Singaporeans that may be forced to retire during a recession, but has not enough money in their CPF, and may therefore have to sell their flat at a low price point? Not everyone can control when they retire or when they must monetize their flat for retirement. This is a real problem, and I hope members on the other side of the House will consider when they are voting for the two motions. At the same time, the Affordable Home Scheme increases owner occupation intent without having to tighten current rules on the minimum occupation period, which Ms. Denise Phua has suggested. Application for BTOs in popular areas will increase, and upper middle income Singaporeans may be unhappy, but that is the cost we have to pay to reduce social inequality. Mr. Sitoh Yee Ping, Mr. Seah Yao Chuan, and Mr. Wilkelm Nair are concerned that the PSP's proposals will cause a collapse in resale prices. In fact, a collapse is actually counterintuitive, because in the long term, the supply of resale flats will be reduced, as new sellers will not sell their flats unless the price is high enough for them to earn a profit after paying for the deferred land cost. Furthermore, there will also be support for the resale market from the backlog of housing demand. In addition, a large pool of buyers who are ineligible for BTO flats, buyers who want to live in a specific location because they want to live near their parents, permanent residents, and demand from buyers who want to upgrade to a larger flat, forms a large pool of demand that will underpin the resale market. Most importantly, we must bear in mind that in Singapore, the resale HDB market is still much lower than the private property market. So there's a demand there. But I believe that the affordable home scheme is also aiming at to engineer a soft landing of the current surging resale market. That would be healthy after recent market exuberance. We want a buoyant resale market, not an exuberant one. At the same time, to complement that strategy with the Millennium Apartment Scheme, which can increase the number of housing units in the same prime location housing site by building smaller units for rentals. So these quality rental apartments will absorb demand while people are waiting for their new flats. I think the Millennium Apartment Scheme is a much better policy solution than the PLH scheme in terms of providing choice to young Singaporeans, reducing the profit motive in speculating in HDB flats in mature estates, and thus moderating social inequality. The current BTO system, which feeds on the resale market and vice versa, does not make the overall housing market accessible to young Singaporeans. I think we all agree that this is detrimental to our total fertility rate. The current system cannot provide a large enough price difference between BTO flat and resale flats to restrain the resale market. But the affordable home scheme, which is based on a clean concept of taking out the land cost for the owner-occupier, can do this and make the overall housing market more accessible to young Singaporeans. Next, I want to address some of the questions raised by Mr. Lim Biao Chuan, Mr. Henry Kwek on the affordable home scheme. There are two main areas that they have raised. One is, will the scheme actually increase the cost, the holding cost of the buyers? I call that a break-even price, meaning when the land cost is determined today, you add on the interest payment, and what would be the price going forward when the buyer wants to sell the flat in the market. The idea is that this break-even price should not be much higher than the current price that Singaporeans, for the current HDB owners. Of course, there is an accrued interest involved in the land involved, but we can actually adjust the number of years for accruing the interest. So this is something that we can still subject to more research. But if, as a starting point, we can say that the accrued interest will accrue for 25 years. Okay, that is the normal term of a loan. But first, I propose an idea. But based on the experience that we have in the public housing market, if it's a good idea, then based on the experience accumulated by HDB, we can decide on how much we want to accrue that interest going forward. This one thing. Second thing is, there's a question about what happens if the flat is given to a beneficiary. Do the beneficiary need to pay the accumulated land cost, the accumulated interest on the land cost? The answer is the beneficiary can live in the flat as long as he's just an occupier. But he can also sell the flat. When he sells the flat, then the same rules apply. He has to return the land cost with the accrued interest to the past reserves. But if he cannot sell the flat in the market, then he sells the flat back to HDB based on a a formula which I've explained to Ms. Carrie Tan just now. It is based on the user price minus the location premium and some depreciation. Again, we can decide on how much depreciation we want to put into the price later. So I've addresses the resale market. I've also addressed some of the questions raised by the members. Next, I will address the impact or the perceived impact on reserves. Given the advantages of the Affordable Home Scheme and the Millennial Apartment Scheme, their implementation will require the government to change its mindset regarding accounting for land reserves. I beg to disagree with Mr. Cheng Sing Yao and Mr. Sito that we must necessarily charge a price because land is a scarce resource. PSP believes that land cost should not be charged for owner-occupied HDB flats because it is a public good with all the social benefits that can be shared by society. Our proposals are still fair to future generations because not all the land cost will be lost. We are also giving the present generation a leg up to do better, which is the best inheritance we can pass on to our future generation. In fact, the Affordable Home Scheme will make it fairer for future generations who can enjoy HDB flats at the user price rather than the higher BTO price in the future. This is the most consistent and fair treatment for every Singaporean in each generation. Whether it is a draw on reserves, actually we all know, depends on the definition of use. If the use is to serve a very useful purpose, then we should not hesitate to actually redefine the use. Public housing land is state land. We can redefine it. If public housing land is defined as state land, then there's no question about the use of reserves. But there will be a cost. There will be a cost. But still, this cost can be managed under our budget resources, and there's no need to use the reserves, actually. Ms. Denise Phua asked about the fiscal implications of our policies. Actually, the total land cost paid by the HDB is only about $3 billion a year. Under our scheme, most of it will not be permanently lost, first of all, and can be recovered with interest from the deferred land cost. But even if we need to fund the whole sum, we have more than sufficient fiscal resources required for the implementation of the reset. We only need the government to do more for Singaporeans because we actually have the resources. The government has been saving repeatedly, again and again, in many ways, just to take the resources and put it into the reserves. First of all, reserves accumulation. Okay, that's something that you cannot spend unless the president approves it. Second, the government said, put 50% of the net investment return into reserves. You can only use 50%. So that 50% become the net investment return contribution, which goes to the budget. But yet again, I don't know whether members noticed, 80% of our NRIC was never used, maybe except during the COVID years, in the current year. For most of the years, the NRIC was reparked into endowment and trust funds. So this is the money, 50% of the net investment reserve returns they're supposed to use for the budget. We will assume that it should be used for the current year for the benefit of Singaporeans. But the Minister of Finance put that under endowment and trust funds again. So the funds again are not used in the current year. For example, in 2019, $13.57 billion, or 80% of the NRIC, was plowed back into the funds. Hence, if we can use part of that money, the $3 billion that we are talking about, to execute the public housing reset, represents a very small fraction of the NRIC allocated to the budget each year. So we can see that we do not need to use any additional reserves at all. We only need to deploy our current resources where and when they are needed. I hope with the above, I hope I've addressed most of the members' questions. But of course, questions are welcome afterwards. Next, I'll conclude today's debate, although the conclusion will take some time.
Members do know that you're not obliged to ask clarifications if you don't want to.
The asset enhancement policy, which started in the 1990s, may have reached its limit, as the price of any asset cannot rise forever, especially one with a lease decay problem. The government's appreciating asset narrative for the HDB flat has become untenable, as more than 50% of the HDB flats will be over 50 years old by 2030. It is actually counterintuitive also to believe that a system that relies on rising HDB prices can actually deliver affordability. So the ecosystem developed to sustain the asset enhancement policy, like the BTO supply and pricing systems, as well as the link between CPF retirement funds and housing prices, must be reviewed and changed accordingly. We have explained why the Affordable Home Scheme and Millennial Apartment Scheme are the way to achieve a reset of the public housing policy. When PSP advocates that land cost be taken out of the pricing of owner-occupied HDB flats, so that every Singaporean in each generation can have access to affordable housing, we also believe that this is in keeping with the spirit with which our pioneer generation sacrificed their land for national development, a spirit which the government might have forgotten from the 1990s onward. The pioneer generation have responded to the call for national development and sacrificed much when they gave up their land. These are not just the big landlords and capitalists, but also ordinary Singaporeans, including farmers who are resettled from rural areas such as Choa Chu Kang, Lim Chu Kang, and Punggol, and indigenous Malay fishermen who were resettled from the Southern Islands. They surrendered their land to the government in the hope that it would be used to improve the lives of Singaporeans, not for the government to accumulate reserves for the sake of accumulating, with no clear and transparent definition as to what constitutes a rainy day, when we can use the reserves for the benefit of Singaporeans. In the run-up to this debate, some descendants of the pioneer generation who had given up their land came to see me and asked me to fight for affordable homes for their children. Isn't it a great irony that a family had earlier given up its land for a pittance, thus sacrificing housing for its descendants, is now seeing its descendants pay $500,000 each for a 90 square meter BTO flat. Thus, PSP believes it is the government's duty to live up to the hopes and expectations of the pioneer generation and repay them by ensuring that descendants continue to have affordable homes. Mr. Speaker, Mandarin please. 亲爱的新加坡同胞，我相信很多国人和我一样，还记得不少建国一代国人在上世纪70、80年代被迫在土地征用法令下牺牲他们的土地时的情景。这些建国一代国人当中，有大地主和资本家，但很多的是许许多多平凡的新加坡人，例如榜鹅的猪农、葱毛园和韭菜巴的村民，还有大势渔村的渔民。我们的祖辈大多心甘情愿地把他们的土地交给行动党所领导的政府。他们知道，他们牺牲自己的土地和既有的生活方式，是为了国家的发展，也符合大多数人的利益。他们相信，政府会好好利用他们的土地，为他们的子孙提供价廉物美的主物，为新加坡人打造更美好的未来。但是，走到今天，主物政策反而为我国各世代的小市民造成了沉重的负担。虽然建国一代先辈的土地是以地价被政府征用，他们的子孙却无法直接从中受益，因为建务局必须以市价购买土地，兴建政府主屋。虽然 BTO 主屋价格不与市价挂钩，但是长期而言，土地市价不断上升，究竟会迫使 BTO 主屋价格上涨。除此之外 ，BTO 主屋等候时间漫长，使许多年轻夫妇选择在转售市场以高昂价格购买主屋。目前居高的房价不仅对许多年轻人是个沉重的负担，更是个使他们延迟成家立业、无法充分发挥才能的枷锁。在昨天的和今天的辩论中，前进党提出了安居乐计划，让国人在购买主屋的时候免付地价，以减低住屋成本。国人只有在转售主屋时，才需要将地价连本带利还给政府。这也表示，一对夫妇如果从结婚到终老都住在同一间主屋，他们就无需自付地价。为了给年轻人提供更多住房选择，前进党也提出了千禧房计划，让年轻人以廉价、长期租赁市区的优质主屋。这两项政策将大大减轻年轻人的住屋负担，也会给予年轻人 更多创业和实现梦想的空间，还会为市区注入新的活力。更重要的是，在减低住屋成本之后，年轻人无需动用大笔公积金存款供房，这将打破房价必须持续上升，否则国人没钱退休的恶性循环。前进党认为，国人不应该要卖祖屋或务期养老，每一个人都应该拥有自己的祖屋的同时，达到公积金基本存款额度。我们的国家有足够的资源实现这个理想。前进党的安居乐计划将把这个梦想化为现实。安居乐计划和千禧房计划将不会掠夺我国的储备金。虽然国人在安居乐计划下购买祖屋时免付地价，但是在转售祖屋时，还是需要将地价连本带利归还给政府，所以大部分的地价迟早都会被收回到储备金。更何况，被豁免的地价每年也只不过是30-40亿左右，这与国家储备金净投资回报相比是小巫见大巫。因为每年的储备金净投资回报已经达到400亿新元。我们的国家有能力承担这些政策所带来的财政开支，国人无需过度担心。储备金不会减少，我们还是会继续坚持前人种树，后人乘凉的治理原则。另一方面，许多拥有地期越来越短的高龄祖屋的乐龄人士，则有另外一种担忧。许多新加坡人都利用公积金存款供房，因此到了退休年龄之后，必须通过各种方式套现他们的祖屋。许多人不介意那样做，也不担心房价会下跌，因为政府多年来强调，祖屋价格是一直上涨的宝贵资产。但是近年来，高龄祖屋的价格上涨跟不上新祖屋的价格上涨幅度，因为大家开始重视地期归零的问题。这个问题不容忽视。前进党呼吁政府尽快公布 VERS 的赔偿细节，以了结地期归零的问题和维持高龄祖屋转售市场的稳定。祖屋是我国最大的成就之一，但是祖屋政策急需与时俱进，以确保每一代的国人都能够从中受益。
Mr. Leong, you have a minute left.
我国的土地资产是宝贵的，是每一代新加坡国民的共有资产。前进党所提出的安居乐计划，将是确保新加坡公民能够世代得益我国土地资产的警示良策。这也与政府近半个世纪以来在土地征用法令下所存在的土地改革精神，这也与政府近半个世纪以来在土地征用法令下所存在的土地改革精神高度契合，并将成为其宝贵的延续。Mr. Speaker, the President said at the opening of this 14th Parliament that Singaporeans are masters of their own land. But that rings hollow when a significant number of Singaporeans have difficulties owning a house. I've spoken about this.
Mr. Leong, please wrap up.
Thanks.
You exceeded your time.
Okay. I've spoken about this in my maiden parliamentary speech on 1st September 2020. I say, it is disconcerting to have many of our countrymen live outside Singapore in Johor and Batam, while we are housing more than 2 million foreigners on our island at the same time. Surely, more consideration can be given to Singaporeans who are citizens of our sovereign city-state. So let us work together as one united people to achieve a better future for Singapore and Singaporeans. Singaporeans deserve better. Thank you.